One of the challenges of teaching history is helping students find relevant connections to their own lives. They often struggle to see how something that happened so long ago could impact them. Every unit, I try to use projects, discussions, and simulations that focus on current problems and events to show students a link between their learning and the world today. Recently, in my world history class, we looked at the age of exploration, focusing on the major trade routes and the movement of people, goods, and ideas across different regions during the time period. To connect the history to present day, I decided to dive into the concept of globalization. My students have grown up in a consumerist society, part of a global trading network, and I wanted them to think about the impact their choices as a consumer can have on the environment and people around the globe. Before jumping into the concept, I wanted to get my students moving and experiencing some of the basic ideas of trade. I have found immersing students into an experience leads to more reflection, discussion, and curiosity about a topic. My students played National Geographic's trading game, working with their groups to gain the most points by negotiating with other groups in the hopes of gaining more resources. I loved watching groups develop their own strategies to win. For instance, one group decided to slowly obtain all the coffee from other countries. They thought by focusing on the lowest valued resource, it would add up in the end. Another group focused on making alliances in hopes of gaining something from the friendships later in the game. Students were both excited and frustrated, but most importantly, they were engaged. While debriefing the game, students claimed that trading was really hard and it wasn't fair. They said some countries were very easy to trade with, while others were greedy and less cooperative. This led to conversations about alliances, war, and imperialism, all topics that we have discussed in class throughout the school year. Seeing my students draw on prior knowledge demonstrated both their understanding and their ability to make connections between concepts. Once I sparked some curiosity in my students, I believe their minds are ready for new information, which led us to reading an article about globalization. To interact with the text, I used a student-led protocol where groups collaborated to create a map of their understanding of globalization. Each group took different approaches, and I enjoyed watching leaders emerge from the conversation to help organize and encourage everyone to contribute their ideas. These mind maps led us to a conversation about the impact of globalization on the world. Students then researched the pros and cons and then ultimately debated whether or not globalization was good or bad. Students concluded that globalization had contributed a great deal of good to history and the world. However, there are many negative sides to globalization that should not be ignored nor accepted. My students observed that while many of the problems they listed are large and complex, solutions are not impossible. This was such a proud moment for me. My students were not discouraged by the magnitude of these negative impacts before them. They demonstrated their empowerment and growth mindset. This was the perfect setup for our final activity, where students reflected on their own impact on the world. We researched where some of their favorite products come from, mapping the locations, and talking about the complexity of global trade connecting so many countries around the world. Their observations and questions led to a deeper discussion and inquiry about the consumption of resources and the impact it can have on people and the environment. Students discovered that impact goes beyond just what clothes we buy, but our habits related to water, food, transportation, and more. This energy and interest created a natural transition to empower students to search for solutions. In groups, students brainstormed ways someone could reduce their negative impact on the world, and then presented ideas that they could personally do in their daily lives. Students made suggestions that ranged from recycling and reusing goods to reflecting on water consumption and the sources of their food. While debriefing, several students commented that people don't have to do something huge to make a positive impact, and if enough people choose to do something, major change can happen. In addition to understanding how the world is interconnected through curiosity, collaboration, and problem solving, I observed students developing their empathy skills. One of my students said, "When we leave self-centeredness behind, we are able to connect with the rest of the globe on a different level." My students reflected on their own choices and behaviors, considered how they could be negatively impacting other people in the environment. This is not always an easy thing to get teenagers to think about, but this shows how much my students do care, and when they feel like they can make a difference, there is space for empathy to grow. I appreciate all the resources available through National Geographic to enhance my instruction, supporting many of the elements already present in my classroom. This approach to teaching does take time to plan and craft creative ways to engage students. However, the outcome for students is so rewarding. The classroom just comes alive. The conversation around globalization I had with my students in this lesson demonstrated the importance of fostering an engaging learning environment that encourages collaboration, critical thinking, and curiosity. Without these elements, it could be very difficult to empower students to approach problems with a solution-driven mindset and believe their ideas and voices are important in bringing about change in their local communities and around the world.